the 18th of September, 1931. Japan, seeking raw materials to fuel its growing industries, invades Manchuria, an industrial area located in northeastern China known for its rich mineral and coal reserves. Despite Chinese opposition, the Japanese continue to advance, and by the 27th of February, 1932, the last Chinese opposing the Japanese are forced to surrender, and all of Manchuria is in Japanese hands. On the 1st of March, the Japanese established the puppet state of Manchukuo, which is supervised by a Japanese general who serves as chief of the Japanese secret services in China. This general devises, initiates, and oversees a wide range of activities, systematically exploiting the occupied areas and disrupting Chinese social structure to weaken public resistance. He employs every possible kind of action, including deliberately fueling criminality, fostering drug addiction, sponsoring terrorism, assassinations, blackmail, bribery, opium trafficking, racketeering, and spreading every kind of corruption in the almost ungovernable country. This general's name is Kenji Doihara. Kenji Doihara was born on the 8th of August, 1883 in Okayama City in Japan. Doihara attended military preparatory schools, and in 1904 he graduated from the 16th class of the Imperial Japanese Army Academy. He was then assigned to various infantry regiments as a junior officer, and returned to school to graduate from the 24th class of the Army Staff College in 1912. Doihara spent most of his early career in various postings in northern China, except for a brief tour in 1921 to 1922 as part of the Japanese forces in eastern Russia during the Siberian intervention. In 1927, Doihara was part of an official tour to China and learned to speak fluent Mandarin Chinese and other Chinese dialects. With this, he managed to take a position in military intelligence. From that post in 1928, Doihara masterminded the assassination of Zhang Zuolin, the Chinese warlord who controlled Manchuria. In 1931, he became head of the military espionage operations of the Japanese Army of Manchuria in Tianjin, and the following year, he was transferred to Mukden in Manchuria as head of the Hoten Special Agency, the military intelligence service of the Japanese Kwantung Army. As part of earlier treaty agreements, the Japanese had troops protecting the railroad in southern Manchuria. However, Japan wanted to expand their control over Chinese Manchuria, so on the 18th of September 1931, the Japanese planted a small explosive device next to the tracks owned by Japan's South Manchuria Railroad near the city of Mukden. The explosion that followed became known as the Mukden Incident. Though damage to the railway was minimal, it provided an excuse to the Japanese for the speedy and unauthorized capture of Mukden, now Shenyang, and to seize all the cities along the railroad. Despite Chinese opposition, the Japanese continued to advance, and by the 27th of February, 1932, the last Chinese opposing the Japanese were forced to surrender, and all of Manchuria was in Japanese hands. It was Kenji Doihara who engineered the infamous Mukden Incident, and during the invasion, he facilitated the tactical cooperation between invading Japanese troops. Next, Doihara took on the task to return the former Qing dynasty Emperor Puyi to Manchuria, so as to give legitimacy to the puppet regime. The plan was to pretend that Puyi had returned to resume his throne due to the imaginary popular demand of the people of Manchuria, and that although Japan had nothing to do with his return, it could do nothing to oppose the will of the people. On the 1st of March 1932, the Japanese established the puppet state of Manchukuo, and the same day Puyi was installed as its chief executive. Doihara supervised the new puppet government and named himself mayor of Mukden. He then arranged for the puppet government to ask Tokyo to supply military advice. During the next months, 150,000 soldiers, 18,000 gendarmes, and 4,000 secret police came into the newly founded protectorate. He used them as an occupying army, imposing slave labor and spreading terror to force 30 million Chinese inhabitants into abject submission. For the key role he played in the Japanese invasion of Manchuria, Doihara became a general and earned the nickname Lawrence of Manchuria, a reference to Lawrence of Arabia. However, Doihara's activity in China vastly exceeded the normal behavior of an intelligence officer. As chief of the Japanese Secret Service in China, he worked out, put in motion, and oversaw a wide series of activities, systematically exploiting the occupied areas and disrupting Chinese social structure in the rest of the country to weaken public resistance by using every possible kind of action, including deliberately fueling criminality, fostering drug addiction, sponsoring terrorism, assassinations, blackmail, bribery, opium trafficking and racketeering, and spreading every kind of corruption in the almost ungovernable country. After the occupation of Manchuria, the Japanese Secret Service, under his supervision, soon turned Manchukuo into a vast criminal enterprise in which rape, child molestation, sexual humiliation, sadism, assault, and murder became an institutionalized means of terrorizing and controlling Manchuria's Chinese and Russian populations. Robbery by soldiers and gendarmes of the Kempeitai, the Japanese secret police, arbitrary confiscation of property, and unabashed extortion became common. Underground brothels, opium dens, gambling houses, and narcotic shops run by Japanese gendarmes competed with the state monopoly syndicate of opium. Doihara soon expanded his activity into the still unoccupied parts of China. By using about 80,000 paid Chinese villains, known as Chiang Mao Tao, he funded hundreds of criminal groups, using them for every kind of social disturbance, turnover, assassinations, and sabotage inside unoccupied China. Through the organizations, he soon managed to control a large part of the opium traffic in China, using the money earned to fund his covert operations. He hired an army of agents and sent them throughout China as representatives of various humanitarian organizations. They established thousands of health centers, mainly in the villages of the districts, for curing tuberculosis, which was then epidemic in China. By adulterating medicines with opium, he managed to addict millions of unsuspecting patients, expanding social denigration into areas which had been hitherto untouched by the increasing breakdown of Chinese society. The scheme also created a pool of addicted victims, desperate to offer any kind of service to secure a daily dose of opium. He initially gave food and shelter to tens of thousands of Russian white émigré women who had taken refuge in the Far East after the defeat of the White Russian anti-Bolshevik movement during the Russian Civil War and the withdrawal of the Entente and Japanese armies from Siberia. Having lost their livelihoods, and with most of them widowed, Doihara forced the women into prostitution, using them to create a network of brothels throughout China, where they worked under inhuman conditions. The use of heroin and opium was promoted to them, as a way to tolerate their miserable fate. Once addicted, the women were used to further spread the use of opium among the population by earning one free opium pipe for every 6 they were selling to their customers. Winning the necessary support from the authorities in Tokyo, he persuaded the Japanese tobacco industry, Mitsui, of Mitsui Zaibatsu, to produce special cigarettes bearing the popular Far East trademark Golden Bat. However, they were intended only for export, and their circulation was prohibited in Japan. Their distribution in China and Manchuria, where the full production was exported, was controlled by Doihara services. In the mouthpiece of each cigarette, a small dose of opium or heroin was concealed, and by this subterfuge, millions of unsuspecting consumers were added to the ever-growing crowds of drug addicts in the crippled country, simultaneously creating huge profits. The revenue from the narcotization policy in China, including Manchukuo, was estimated at 20 to 30 million yen per year, and the annual revenue was estimated by the Japanese military at $300 million a year. In 1937, it was pointed out in the League of Nations that 90% of all illicit white drugs in the world were of Japanese origin. Kenji Doihara became the world's most powerful drug trafficker. Given the chaotic situation in China, the corruption Doihara methodically spread did not take long to reach the very top. In 1938, 8 generals, all in command of Chinese divisions, were executed when it was found that they were informers for Doihara's services. During the next 6 years of war, when high-ranking Chinese officials were found guilty of every kind of dealing with Doihara, they were executed. However, to many Westerners in touch with Chinese leadership, the purges did not have lasting results. Doihara's activity played a key role in shattering China's ability to confront Japan's expansion by generating chaotic conditions which prevented any mass reaction in the invaded country. In 1940, Doihara became a member of the Supreme War Council, which the same year shifted its military policy in China to what was called the Three Alls: kill all, burn all, loot all. On the 7th of December 1941, at 7:55 a.m., the first of two waves of Japanese naval aircraft launched from 6 aircraft carriers attacked Pearl Harbor, catching the US forces completely by surprise. 2,400 US sailors and soldiers were killed, and 1,200 wounded. Pearl Harbor was the most important American naval base in the Pacific, and home to the US Pacific Fleet. The attack on Hawaii and other US territories led the United States to formally enter World War II on the side of the Allies, the day following the attack on the 8th of December, 1941. As a general in the Japanese Army Air Force and a member of the Supreme War Council, Doihara had voted approval of the attack on Pearl Harbor. Until the end of the war, Doihara held various high positions in Japanese military, one of which was the appointment as the governor of Johor State in Malaya and commander-in-chief of the Japanese 7th Army in Singapore until 1945. At the time of the surrender of Japan, on the 2nd of September 1945, Doihara was Commander-in-Chief of the 1st General Army. After the war, he was arrested by the Allied occupation authorities and tried before the International Military Tribunal of the Far East as a Class A war criminal, together with other members of the Manchurian administration responsible for the Japanese policies there. Doihara's reaction to the chief prosecutor's opening statement was the following: "Even if the entire nation speaks ill of me, I will stand firm as a rock, and the value of my life won't be impaired at all." According to the indictment, as tools of successive Japanese governments, Doihara and his comrades pursued a systematic policy of weakening the native inhabitants' will to resist, by directly and indirectly encouraging the increased production and importation of opium and other narcotics, and by promoting the sale and consumption of such drugs among such people. He was found guilty and sentenced to death by hanging. Doihara later said that when the death verdict was pronounced, all his worries left him, and almost at once he began to feel better. Kenji Doihara was 65 years old when he was executed on the 23rd of December 1948 at Sugamo Prison in Tokyo. There were no tears shed for Kenji Doihara.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.